Oh boy. Hello everyone. It is me, Emmerron. We're back. It's been a couple of chaotic weeks. In case you guys haven't been paying attention to gestures broadly. Between the holidays and the very real life we are all living, the shared reality that we all occupy, but we are back. It has been a few weeks. It has been vaguely restful. It's been good to get a little bit of time away. But yes, my name is Emmerron. If you're new here, this is Wireheads. We do a Cyberpunk podcast. We talk about this game. The topic, as you might see today, is time travel. We'll get into that in a moment. Of course, I can't do that alone because otherwise just be me preaching to a camera, and ain't nobody want to hear that. So that's why I brought my trusty time travel companion and co-host with me.
Hello everybody, I'm Diamond Dust, and yeah, it's been a hot minute since I've been on, but I got some stuff, shaking in the background, including getting the group together for an upcoming Cyberpunk Red game, which Emmerron's going to be playing in as well.
Yes.
Which actually, this does kind of fit in because you guys are going to be playing in the year 2042. Yep. And I'm just kind of sitting here thinking about this, just like, oh, wow, that's very relevant to what we've been doing with our games. Yes. I do stuff here on Twitch. I'm doing stuff on YouTube. And also to my YouTube people, there will be important things coming, including a special guest that I met at RenCon last year. So with that, Emmerron, time travel, this isn't supposed to be high fantasy sci-fi. This is cyberpunk, where gritty gun, shoot, bang, kill.
So
what? Time travel.
To use a phrase that has been uttered by Jay Gray, I believe, several times, with the power of tech invention, anything is possible.
Oh no.
However,
no, I don't like where that's going. It's like Nyla's quantum physics gun again.
Yeah. Oh well, that was just a particle accelerator. That's not nearly that exotic. But, However, this when I wrote down time travel, for those of you who are joining us on YouTube, this is mild clickbait. I'm not wanting to discuss the physical, we're going to the past or the future, in the sense that your character starts in one year and ends up Back to the Future style in another. Instead, I want to talk about how we can modify timeline and develop not only like alternate timelines, alternate histories, but as has become this kind of weird tradition, I think, in a lot of your recent campaigns, and certainly with Neon Inferno, which starts back on Monday, which I am extremely excited for.
Oh boy,
we're playing with timeline stuff that has a continuity established for a timeline that exists kind of outside of canon. So this today is going to be us discussing and talking about the topic of how to do that, how to look at perhaps the world that you have developed through a campaign, and when you want to tell other stories that align into that, whether those are stories as the timeline has progressed and factor in character decisions and events that the previous campaigns may have done, or if we're talking about it through the lens of the past, perhaps, like where we want to say, okay, yes, but I want to tell some additional layered narrative in a future campaign. So in order to do that, we need to establish how things happen, and there are a couple ways to do that. Certainly, like Diamond has run several campaigns at her table, where now we're going backwards and seeing what happened before, right?
Yep.
So this I thought was a nice timely topic, given that both of us have recently really had to do a lot of work in this exact arena to kind of like navigate our own timelines, and this is, I suppose, an opportunity to kind of share what we learned. So I, as of yet, have at least not myself developed a backwards facing timeline. So I think, Diamond, you probably have just a little more insight where that's concerned, because I know that that's obviously fairly different from looking into the future, because we do have a little, I feel like we have a little more guidance almost on what it looks like to peer forward than we do to peer backward, just because of the benefit we have of like the CEMK. For those of you who don't know the acronym, the Cyberpunk Edgerunners Mission Kit, which is the yellow starter box that we've got now, that lets you play a campaign in roughly the time of the video game and the anime, and get a little guidance on how the world has changed according that direction. So I suppose, as Back to the Future began, let's start in the past. As you've developed, I guess, these timelines for these alternate histories of your version of Night City, what kinds of considerations did you, I suppose, start with in terms of like developing that out when you kind of looked at doing that?
So, like, when I was looking at, like, for my streams, like, because we are working towards the year 2045, but I started with, like, the year 2041, just because usually, like, somewhere between a 3 to 4 year gap, there is still, like, it is still close enough to the year that you're aiming for that you're not going to have, like, large deviations from what should be there. But at the same time, you like, you and I, how long ago did we meet? What was it now? 3 years ago? 2 years?
Coming very close to
2023, I think.
Yeah. It's getting really close to 3.
All right, so 2023, things were different back then. Like, in a matter of a 3 year span, like, some things are different. Given, yes, we've been through a lot, while also kind of fitting alongside the cyberpunk world, we've been through a lot of extreme changes in our, the way we have to live. But at the same time, not everything changes. To a point where, like, maybe certain brands are still around, maybe certain items haven't come out yet. Perhaps there's things that were around during, leading up before 2045 that got outlawed because, like, no, this is a bad idea. We shouldn't be fucking around with this kind of situation. So I always considered, like, what might be there, what might be around. And I figured that, like, if I recall, like 2040, 2041, I think in the CEMK, or maybe in the core rule book, they were talking about the building of some of the first mega structures in Night City.
Right.
Where they were doing the building of, like, Mega Building H. Because Mega Building H4 is going to be in NC 2045. It's in the Atlas. It's mentioned through the Rat Kings.
H4 and H10, I believe, are both very much under construction. Because I know even in Street Stories, they describe in one of the adventures, one of the places you go, they describe as like a distant mega building being constructed in Watson, which we would know is H10.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have kind of an idea of what might be around. We have an idea of what's around during 2045, and depending on the pace that things get done, and for what we can tell at the time of the Red, in multiple like interviews that we've seen in different DLCs, I had determined, okay, some years are really, really good, others not so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a discussion with Jay Gray that we had at PAX Unplugged, 2045 was like right when the momentum was moving at full speed to rebuild.
Yeah.
Like they had finally gotten to full speed.
Yes. Yeah, that I believe is correct. I know, I can't remember if it was in one of those discussions or in the book itself. And I think the CMK timeline kind of clarifies this as well pretty succinctly, that 2045 really stands out as like an inflection point. It's this like very critical line in the sand where the city has pretty much been dragged back from the edge that it was teetering on after the Night City Holocaust, and is now basically reestablished itself, but the corporations still aren't on their full footing yet. So there is a wealth of supplies that still get into the city at this point. Reconstruction efforts have begun in earnest. Like there's quite a few of those efforts to like tear out the old and build new, but none of them have gained a ton of ground yet. Like there's definitely a few places where we kind of see the impact of this. The Glen is like a really solid one. One that I'm kind of curious to see a little more of, just because we know this is what will lead to some of the construction of what will be known as Haywood by the time of the 70s, is the
reclamation?
The reclamation zone. Yeah,
yep.
the one just to the east of the port there. So there's some of that obviously is like, that is all very much peaking around that time, right?
Yes.
And maybe 10 years into that is where we really start seeing like the needle shift pretty hard toward corporations reclaiming their throne and their power, and a lot of these like relatively fragile kind of social structures break apart in the or not so much break apart, but kind of fall back under corporate control rather than being democratized, like so many of them kind of are within the time of the Red. Like corporations still wield immense power, don't get me wrong, but like the fact that nomads, for example, those are completely necessary. Edge runners are by and large an embedded component of how society works.
Yep.
And while they kind of keep to that, it doesn't stay the same, right? After about 30 years, that is largely shifted so that edge runners, I think now, or by the time of the 70s, I think what were called edge runners are now mostly called mercenaries, because that's what most of them have become. And they're no longer just like your average like street punks. They are by and large like doing some pretty heavy stuff throughout the city. Like those aren't simple go get me this gigs anymore. For the most part, they are like, I need you to do some like wet work for me, or I need you to go and like deal with this problem that is definitely above and beyond what I think a lot of edge runners deal with in the time of the Red. Like things happen still, but everything in the 70s feels like a 2000 Eddie gig instead of it being these like simple things, you know?
Basically, the needs of people change, so the market changes.
Right.
And fixers have different work for you. So when I look at like the early 2040s, we aren't like to a point where it is so hard to find anything that like even fixers trying to find 500 Eddie items would be a challenge. But we are still at a spot where it's just like, yeah, you can find some grenades, or yeah, you can find a few packs of basic ammo from time to time. You know, like the place that, you know, you can reliably find, you know, cactus water during 2045, sure, but they were probably, you know, in 2041, which for anyone wondering who Cactus Water is, they're a subsidiary of Petrochem that just they make water. There's nothing more to it. They may not be in every Oasis convenience store, not Oasis, but 100 Underhaven. You're probably seeing, you know, with Oasis, they are mainly in rebuilding urban areas and maybe some overpacked suburbs. They don't stray too close to one block. What? I'm trying to think, what other changes have I made? Even some of the stronger fixers at the party have met sometimes struggled to find items that they should be able to find on a piece-by-piece basis, depending on who makes it. Because if it's from overseas, there's a 50-50 chance that they can find it. And the fact that we got single-player mode, it was just like, this is perfect. This is what I needed for it.
Yeah. No, I think single-player mode does help in that regard, where it's like there's a lot that kind of I guess it just kind of helps examine the city beyond I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase that. You get a little more depth that to now we maybe have had to really dig into the source material for, and this just kind of gives it to you on the surface, so you don't need to like do the deep dive and learn all the back lore like we both had to do in the last like how many years. So yeah, like the back lore thing not being a necessary dive because of having that as a tool is like kind of a nice thing to kind of be able to, you know, work with that as a resource for that.
On top of all that, when we're looking at like the 2030s, where the 2030, like when I was looking at like what the early 2040s looked like, I read the overview on the 2030s, which that for anyone that might be wondering, where is that? It's in the core rulebook on like page 292, 293, where we looked at like the survival and recovery of Night City.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you said, it was being pulled back from the edge. And the way I treat 2041 is like, that is like 2040, 2041 that is the year where finally people were starting to get comfortable enough with trying to go back to some form of normalcy. Whatever normalcy might even exist in the Red.
Yeah. I mean, there's enough of it that at that point, you know, the city has established that kind of really rough equilibrium with itself. Like, it's definitely not perfect, but it's certainly not teetering on anarchy anymore, at least in most of it, right? There are still pockets of that. Like, the hot zone is like the prime example of that.
Yes.
But like, even the combat zones kind of roughly begin to have that order to them. And that's, to be honest, kind of stuff that I'm eager to see kind of the deep dive into that in Night City 2045 when that comes out. But like, even now, we know enough between all the lore that we've been presented between the core rule book, the adventure books, the Atlas that has kind of given us a little bit of additional insight that is modernizing some of the info we've got from some of those older books. That is kind of very vague outlines that I'm sure are going to be filled in much greater detail within NC 2045. We've kind of got that idea of like, okay, so even combat zones have social order to them. We see things like the gold dragons. We see, the tiger claws acting as a sort of like weird, fucked up, definitely corrupt, as if the police weren't already though. But a fucked up, like constabulatory force where they just are like, we will stabilize Old Japantown in our image, or at least to our benefit, right? But it's very much like, okay, you guys are established, like you clearly control the district. Whatever shape that takes is another story, but it's really just, to me at least, it looks like the only real combat zone in the Time of the Red that is like a little more toward that anarchy is the old combat zone, and even that has some factions that we're starting to see, like the zoners are definitely one of those that we saw in Danger Gal. The Atlas clearly shows like there is enough attention on the district for it to have a district manager. So like even that kind of view of that is kind of called into question. It's kind of ironic actually, and I'm gonna be curious to see if when we get like the new threat ratings kind of assessed as the city has kind of morphed. It's kind of weird to me, honestly, that Rancho Coronado isn't considered a combat zone, given that it has no manager. Like that is the closest thing to anarchy we kind of have in that way.
And I was thinking about it, like looking at Rancho, and Rancho is a combat zone in my setting in the early 40s, but due to a group of fixers and also people next door wanting a little more stability from their neighbors, the threat of Rancho Coronado got dialed down pretty quickly.
Yeah. Like I could see it not holding the flame of conflict for very long, but it's not like they're devoid of desirable things, right? It's not like they're barren of that. So again, that'll be an interesting district for me to really sink my teeth into, but that's kind of separate from, I guess, the topic at hand. So
the future.
Yeah, so for the future,
on the other hand.
Yeah. So this is going to be kind of, there are two layers to this. Layer one is Neon Inferno is batshit insane.
Yes.
This is where I always go back to this whenever I hear people in the broader community, either on Reddit or in Discord, where people are so afraid of breaking the timeline, quote unquote, right? because they know in their mind, they're like, but the 2070s still have to happen. So like, I can't fuck up the city that bad. It's you're wrong. You can. Turns out dropping another nuke on it and bioweapons and all manner of other things is not at all it's not at all forbidden. I have not been shot by the Artel Saurian assassins yet, and I've done both of those things over the last couple seasons of Neon Inferno. I've collapsed part of the Little Europe business district into the ocean. Like, I've done all kinds of stuff. Night City is a giant Lego city in my head, and I will mess with it as I see fit. And I feel like while there are enough people that have that view, that I definitely, there are some people I'm sure that are going to look at what I'm saying right now and say, you know, you're preaching to the choir. I feel like there are enough people in the community, though, that this needs to be reiterated. You can do anything you want to Night City. The 2070s do not have to look anything like the video game by the time those years come, right? You can really do a number on the city to the point that where I'm developing, so my campaign, because I don't know if I've talked about this in explicit detail before now, at least on the show, but Neon Inferno Season 3, whereas the first two seasons were like 2045, right? We had like the first like 3 months of 2045 roughly in the first season, and we had the latter like it was like 6 months later, so it was like the last 3 months of 2045 in the second season. In season 3, we are going to 2063. We are going all the way.
Oh, you're going to the 60s. Okay.
We're going to the 60s. So we are not going to be we're not going to be afraid of some things. And obviously the city is going to look a very different shade of messed up in some ways than the prime timeline that we get in the CEMK would have you believe. There are certain things, obviously, that I think happen regardless. Like, for example, some of the plagues and stuff, or some of the outbreaks and pandemics we get in the interstitial time there, those still happen in my timeline, because I'm like, nothing's really going to stop that. But there are other things. Obviously, like, Militech has been thrown out of the city. Like, there is no place for them within the city after they've been attacked pretty viciously by the last two groups of edge runners. So their presence of the city is almost down to nothing, right? They've taken for greener pastures elsewhere that would have them. Namely Arizona. Arizona is one of those places where they've got a newfound presence. And there's, in their place, obviously, a bit of a power vacuum. And given the sort of chaos that happened at the very end of season 2, where a certain netrunner decided to do a Robin Hood and scramble the bank accounts of the rich into the bank accounts of the poor, because conveniently, even though I didn't know it at the time, Jay Gray has said repeatedly, like, everyone in Night City has some kind of bank account. Like, even the poorest, unhoused people in the city have a bank account. That is how you do transactions. Like, there's a reason that by the 2070s, we see people like, who's the Gary, the prophet? When we see him, whenever you hand him Eddies, he's still doing the Neuroport thing. You see his eyes light up blue when you transfer him Eddies, because he has a bank account somewhere, right? Time of the Red, that's not really any different. Like, people still have digital bank accounts. And so that whole thing, that whole little scheme that Nyla was able to pull off through Peacock at the end of the last season was, as you might imagine, utter fucking chaos. And so what does a city do when they are faced with overwhelming social unrest and instability that is caused by people of lesser means, right? Well, they're going to do some pretty drastic things to put the heel down, right? Whereas before, like, they kept it to the NCPD, we saw in season 2 the NCPD largely lost their potency. Like, they lost the war, right? One of their precincts fell, literally became a crater in the ground. We saw situations arise where they tried to attack the old combat zone. That was very roundly stopped, and there were all kinds of social unrest already bubbling under the surface and kind of sparking up in places before all that happened. So obviously, like, riots and things like that became very common. So that's more like what I start looking at. I start seeing, okay, let's play cause and effect. Thing A happens, what will that cause, you know, within a year, within 2 years, within 5 years? If you look in the finance world, everything that is listed has charts that tell you, based on the last year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, if you had invested like X amount of money this long ago, your balance in that holding would be this as of today, you know? And so I kind of take a similar look of like, okay, let's look 1 year out. What does this look like? 3 years out, what does this look like? 5 years out, what does this look like? And that, I mean, that's been pretty useful to kind of develop what has happened. Because inevitably now we have a city that has responded in pretty hostile ways to edge runners. Like, they are not viewed super favorably. There are definitely communities throughout the city now too, where the edge runners that were living there, they are having a harder time today for the actions of the few that have been taken in the last, you know, decade and a half or so. So yeah, that is kind of the first thing, is let's look at the causes in the past and let's determine the effects they'll have on the future. This is where I think referencing the Prime timeline for some of those global events that will perhaps still occur, or that are broadly still possible, is helpful, because they'll help set your mind against, okay, these are the things that are kind of bubbled up in the background on the world stage, and we can set those against what has happened in the more microscopic part of the setting that we are fucking with, essentially. And then you start projecting those things forward as far as you can to the year that you do want to run in. The other thing that is kind of true now is obviously with the 2060s comes the advent of the Neuroport. And so my players were all told Gen 3 cyberware is on the horizon, because Rockland is no less powerful than it was in the Prime timeline. They haven't been messed with. So as a result, Neuroports and Neuroport technologies are all very around still. Or they've been developed, they are created now. So my players were all afforded the opportunity to install those, albeit at a humanity cost. I basically told them, you know, this isn't going to cut into your starting eddies. If you want to take this, this option is going to be essential to install any new cyberware. Outside of those, you might pick up in like a back alley tech or something like that. But those things are becoming harder and harder to find. They are going the way of the dodo. Gen 3 cyberware is the new standard that pretty much anywhere, even remotely legit, is going to be peddling. So that is still happening. As a result, we are going to be playing around with toys from both timelines, right? The 2040s stuff is still very much in circulation. The 2070s stuff is just beginning to circulate. So we are starting to see things like tech rebuilds, smart rebuilds, power rebuilds. Some of those branded weapons that the CMK refers to as exotic are now beginning to start seeing, if not full distribution and like construction. Those things are now on the horizon and are just beginning to perhaps find their way into the hands of people outside of the bubble that is, the elite or their, private military forces that the corporations have built. So yeah, a lot of looking at this season and the developing forward has been all of that kind of stuff where it's like, let's see where all these things track out and let's see what do we want to shape our game with and like just allow things to exist that will allow for, I guess, the most interesting series of events to play out.
I suppose thinking on some stuff that's going forward and figured I'd ask. Because one of the other things we look at is like the lifestyles.
Yeah.
Does Kibble start phasing out in the 60s then for your timeline by chance? Or is it now going to be like Scop is the new Kibble?
So not quite yet. And that's mostly because of how much social unrest occupies roughly a decade of time following all the events of the first two seasons. So Kibble's still very much a thing. A lot of those developments have been somewhat stymied by the fact that the city is got a lot of unrest still, right? So Kibble's still there. Kibble's still very much there. Cargo container housing, very much still there. That said, the mega buildings by this time have largely been built, or are at the very least as far along by the early 2060s as the earlier mega buildings like H4 and H10 are in the time of the Red. So given that this setting does feature all of the mega buildings being on the map, like the map that I'll be using for the home screen is the CEMK map, not the time of the Red Atlas map. And that's mostly because some of those things that will be really developed in the 70s are far enough along by now that it's probably not right to continue using the old map, even though some of those districts and stuff probably haven't changed. Like one of the players are looking to stay in what is the Haywood Industrial Zone still, but in the time of the 70s it begins to be known as Arroyo. So that shift to Arroyo hasn't happened quite yet, but it's like those changes are beginning. Like that's the social change that we're beginning to see.
And I know that, like, I'm trying to think, is this past the point when Ziggurat gets shut down, or did...
No, yeah, this is very much beyond the point where Ziggurat gets shut down, because there's several events in the earlier seasons that would precipitate that as well.
Does the region, so would the regional net be up yet to where like Pacifica Confed has like connection between each other? Or is it still sitting at?
Yeah, not quite. So the Black Wall is well underway. It's not the like hush secret project we know it is in the time of the Red. That was pretty much, I mean, even though their downfall maybe came a little sooner than it would have come in the like regular, the canonical timeline, that's kind of, this is another one of those cause and effects, like this wouldn't have changed Netwatch's desire to see Ziggurat, leadership like be consigned to like you are going to help us. You are going to fix this problem that you have created, essentially. Because they left glaring holes open in the back end of things. Like, that's the whole reason that Peacock was able to do what he did at the end of the last season. So there were glaring holes everywhere. And Ziggurat could not beat those allegations after all of that happened. So, yeah, they got sunk really hard. The people who were their network engineers have largely been conscripted by Netwatch at this point to assist with the Blackwall project, which is developed to a point now that regular people know about it. Supposedly, the sins of Ziggurat have been, paid for by the development of this thing. Whether it really works is the skepticism right now, but we'll see more about that. The main thing that my players were told is agents have been outlawed at this point.
Oh!
Agents have been outlawed. They are no longer deemed safe, mostly because of this fallout. With that said, though, we're not far enough along in the broader scope of all this for those agents not to be still around in some cases. So, as we know from the CEMK, holophones don't have the +2 to library search because they no longer have an AI assistant, right? So I told the players, you've got a choice to make. Your starting eddies can still have you with an agent at the start of the game here if you want it to. But the trade-off for this is if you use it to run a library search, there's a chance that the Blackwall finds your little AI that is deemed rogue and Netwatch comes knocking on your door. And that is the deal you're making with the devil, essentially, to have that technology still accessible to you. And most of my players looked at that and were like, we don't really want to fuck with that. This is the little teaser for me to give. One of them said, but I didn't live within society as this was all falling apart. I've been kind of removed from it. So I still have one. And I want to keep it that way. And I'm like, all right. So we've got at least one player who has left that thread open where Netwatch could be fucking with the group here before too long. So yeah, it's that time of change, right? That is what the 2060s, I feel like, really represent, because the center of the city has been largely cleared up at this point. North side of the city is still a mess. Like, that by extension has become a very sizable combat zone. Like, the north end of the city has become a combat zone. Pacifica hasn't quite devolved into that yet, but the funds are beginning to dry up. So it's very much shifting from a safe green zone to more of a yellow zone around this time. Haitian refugees are beginning to pour in and have over the last like 2-ish years. Because again, that's another thing, the exodus from the Caribbean, like a lot of the Caribbean nations are beginning to plunge underwater. Nothing has stopped that in the intervening time here, so that still happens. And the faction of Haitian refugees that will one day become Voodoo Boys are in this timeline known as the Hex Weavers. They are a group of netrunners who do not like the way that the Voodoo Boys of the time of the Red have used that name. And they've taken it upon themselves to really master the bleeding edge of quick hacking and stuff like that, which is in my setting here. So we are going to be playing with all the toys. The toolbox is wide open. So if anyone plays with Netrunner, they'll have access to that.
Impressive.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess also something I'm curious about. Have you looked in like the 2020 books at like other tech that might be from back there that may have made a reprisal in the 70s by chance?
So I haven't dug deep down into that, mostly because we've kind of already been getting that through the Red DLCs, where we're the 12 Days DLCs have actually done a ton of that for me already. And so
okay.
if it exists in those books, it exists in the setting. It's kind of the way. Basically, I told my players, whatever exists, regardless of the book that it comes out of, if it's a Red compatible supplement, you know, that is on the table for you, right? Like if it is a Red supplement or DLC, if it's CMK related, if it's 2040s related, regardless of which side of that timeline it's on, all systems, all capabilities, all equipment, all of it is on the table. So yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun. Yeah.
Cyber over there, just Haitian refugees.
Yeah.
The one thing that transcends all time. Yeah.
I mean,
global warming. What a bitch.
Global warming and an exploitable workforce are constants, unfortunately. So those sadly do continue. The suffering of citizens is unfortunately still not something the city cares too much about. So yeah, they are very much still here, and because that corporate funding is starting to dry up now, there's a greater demand on what those people are capable of otherwise, right? Reclaiming some of that lost heritage from the people that would take that from them, is becoming more their focus, so that they can wrangle some of that power into their possession. So yeah.
Oh gosh.
And then
Hands would be around.
Who would be around?
Hands.
Oh yeah, Mr. Hands probably would be around.
I mean, he's old during the 70s, so
yeah, no, he's definitely a factor then. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. And then Culture says, if you're lucky, Interface Red 5 might be around the corner when you start Season 3, more toys then for you to torture your players with. That all depends on what those toys look like. From the enemy perspective, absolutely. We don't know yet what the things that we're getting are going to inject into the game. I know that Rob and Jay have one or both of them confirmed that, so I remember both of them being in the chat when this got mentioned, that this is the most rules that are getting altered by a single article that they have ever written for the game. So whatever the hell Solo of Fortune 2045 is going to be, that is supposed to shift a ton of rules around in the game. And so we don't know what that looks like. We don't know what that all entails. We know that the article itself is supposed to be like a mercenary focused kind of article, which leads me to thinking we might get like war tech stuff. Might mean we get more options for, messing with our gear or weapons or some combination thereof. But yeah, it's all speculation at this point. So we'll see. If it is stuff that messes with anything like the power ceiling, because I know James has mentioned before, like power ceiling of FBCs was kind of the height of what he viewed the power ceiling for Red to be. So I'll be really curious to see how this falls in line with that. The power levels of everything relative here is going to be very interesting to kind of grasp once we get an idea of it.
Yeah, and I suppose to all of you though, if you decide to have like some big major thing happen in your setting, but then it's just like, well, what about, what does this look like for the timeline? Usually there is going to be something in the real world that might somehow give you some good points to look at.
Yeah.
I suppose like one of the things that I used to really just like look at the matter of just the jump from like the 2030s into the 2040s. And I guess, yes, I know I'm going to show my age here for a moment. I'm a millennial, all right? I'm kind of in that weird pocket between the millennials and Gen Z, 1999, where I watched, cassette turn to CD, VHS turn to DVD, and also Blu-ray on top of that. I remember having a landline phone the first time we got a PC in our house. I remember... dial-up. I remember going from dial-up to broadband internet, and you might be wondering, what does this have to do with this? Consider, like, I watched like technology rapidly change in a matter of, I gotta say, probably between the years 2005 to 2015, everything changed so rapidly. I remember we went from cable television to satellite television.
Well, and we know
years.
In the prime timeline, like the Neuroport kind of does that too, where it like
exactly
is hella accelerationist on like a lot of the way that the city shifts, right? That's where a lot of that corporate power is reasserted, is because now everyone's connected to everything, right? That's how quick hacking becomes a thing, is everything is connected. And so when people can connect to one another, bad things can happen really, really quickly. So yeah, it's an exciting thing to get to play with. And so out of necessity, this is where I wanted to kind of like blend those worlds. And that's why like this has been a section of the timeline I've been really excited to explore. And especially given some of the upheaval stuff in the first two seasons of Neon Inferno, there's a lot to do there.
2063, we're also dealing with what? Post-war as well? Like the post-war acceleration, or is that during the height of the Metal Wars?
No, Metal Wars aren't until the end of the decade. Those have yet to happen.
Oh, those are late 60s. Okay, all right. I thought that was early 60s.
No, those start in 2069 because 2070 is the Arvin Accords. So yeah, it's like a brutal year essentially that the Metal Wars constitute. And then those end in early 2070 with the Arvin Accords.
So is that the reunification, or is that the reunification wars I'm thinking of?
The Metal Wars and the reunification wars are the same thing.
Oh, okay, all right. I didn't know if like one was a different campaign from the other.
No, they're just referred to by different names depending on who you ask, but they're the same thing. Yeah, they are, because that's where like the NUSA begins to build its power back, I believe, in the late 50s, if I'm remembering my timeline correctly. So the NUSA hasn't fully developed into the Goliath that it will become quite yet. It's still kind of figuring itself out, because Kress is the president until I think it's like 2052 or 3, something like that. And it's like a 3-decade rule that she has. But eventually that gets turned back over, and the first guy to take the helm is a Biotechnica exec. So it's like there's not this like war hawkish outlook in the early 60s because of that. By the end of the decade, though, that shifts pretty dramatically. And that's where then they begin a campaign that like says, we are a country again. We are a power on the global stage again. We are now going to, manifest some of that destiny and go west like we did once long ago and we're going to re-seize what is rightfully ours and reunify this broken country. And like slowly, one by one, they absorb the lost states back into the Union until they hit NorCal, and then are stopped only by Arasaka being back in time to save them, and that deal with the devil being made. But a fun fact: Arasaka is already back in the city, albeit in a very diminished capacity. They're basically told, "Oh, you wanna help? Well, cool. We have a lack of security corps, so we're gonna give you a building on the northern waterfront of the city. Yes, it's slightly radioactive, and yes, you're pinned in on 3 sides by combat zones, and the 4th is wasteland. So we hope you enjoy. Deal with that, and maybe we'll talk about deepening our relationship further. Have a nice day." So the city is very much like recognizing they need that, but they're definitely not giving them the good end of the stick. They're giving them like, yeah, okay, prove yourself. Here you go, kid. Like, and like telling them to buy their goodwill back bit by bit.
Just give them medium pistol.
Pretty much.
Good luck.
Pretty much. You got a small office plex on the north end of the city, probably near the edge of what would have been the old NorCal military base, that has since been largely demolished, and kind of dropped into the sea after season 1's events. So yeah, it's like combat zone bleeding in from all sides, and Arasaka is the one who gets to deal with that. But obviously they're more than capable, so it's not like they're unable to do it. They're just very much being hazed by the city in a way.
All right. But with that, like, have fun with your timeline. Do make sense for your story. Like, don't worry about the canon timeline. We often say that. Don't worry about it. They are suggestions.
Yeah.
They are guidelines.
Tap sign. They are guidelines. Yeah, no, that's the time. The timeline is a guideline, just like any other. Look at, like I said, the recap here. If you're basing the timeline on a thing your players have already done, write those events into the timeline. At least the most notable of them, right? There's obviously like minor things your players are going to have done that probably won't leave their mark on history, but make note of all the ones that do. Like for Neon Inferno, that would be NCPD Precinct number 1 is attacked and destroyed by a group of edge runners in late 2045. In early 2045, a nuke is dropped on the NorCal military base, decimating Militech's presence and forcing them to a small encampment to the south of the city that serves as their base for the next 6 months, before they are then ousted once again by the end of the year by a second group of edge runners who run into conflict with them. The riots are like the other thing I have noted in my timeline, for example, that follow in the wake of the social upheaval that the party's actions all cause. So yeah, there's a lot of that are noted in my timeline, and then compare it to the prime timeline and say, okay, what now doesn't happen? Because that's just as important as what does, right? What doesn't happen here anymore? And then it's like, okay, well, what still does? And then play those off each other and say, okay, we always want to, because I think we talked about this on the show before, when you're designing the enemy force, whatever that might be, you always want to think about what is the reason that they're doing things, that they're doing the things they are doing, and what are the reasons why that's happening, right? What are they doing and why are they doing it? And if you look at the timeline in the same way and you say, okay, this happens because this group decided to do X, Y, or Z, even if it's based on kind of inferred information that we get. 2077 also has like a ton of lore that goes back quite a ways, so you can kind of see writing on the wall for some of these things if you look at that as a primary source of information as well, if you do care about some of that to like texture the world. But yeah, then once you've got all that established on your timeline, start doing the first year after. What does the first year after look like? and then look at, okay, 3 years after, what does that look like? 5 years after, what does that look like? 10 years after, what does that look like? And then present day, wherever the present day ends up, what do those things look like? And you could do that as many times as you need to for each event. If there's like a series of pretty major events that may have happened in between, you might need to look at that event and then say, okay, for this event, what does 1, 3, 5, 10 look like out from it? And how are those things developing as we come back in and view the world on the street again through the lens of the party? So yeah, all of that is what I would recommend doing. And then pretty much, yeah, decide technologically speaking, because we do have tech ranging from the, if you go back and do the conversion stuff with Old Guns Never Die, you can go back as far as the 20s and as far forward as the 70s, that we've got official gear that has been written for those times, right? And you can use all of it, you can use some of it. If you want to go really insane, you can use none of it and decide to write your own gear lists and stuff like that for whatever reason that you've decided that is the, important thing to do. But all of it can be messed with. Attack the setting, attack the timeline. Don't be afraid to change things. Even if those changes are catastrophic, oh well, so what? Like, they can be catastrophic and make an interesting intro to whatever comes next. Especially if those changes have been informed by player choice and player action. So, with that said, Diamond, do you have anything to add, I guess, to the discussion, or anything to wrap us up with?
On this side, I don't really think so. I guess, if anything, I use a lot of real world observations for how I would, turn the clock back on the setting and how I will probably go forward. But I also tend to move at a snail's pace compared to what you're moving at. Because we're only going to late 2042 for this next season. Because you guys are going to be doing stuff in the summer of that of 2042.
Yeah,
for Broken Circle.
I am very excited. Like, that's going to genuinely be a fun campaign. Because my original group, when we played Red under the Jumpstart kit, we were playing in the 2030s. So I've played in other campaigns that decided to look at a time other than the center of the time of the Red. But it is a different lens, and so it's always interesting to see, especially because I know Broken Circle is obviously taking place beyond Night City, so it'll be pretty fascinating to see how you interpret the world outside of it. It's also exciting to get to play with a couple of people that I have played with before, and get to play with a couple of people that I've either watched on your streams or have been players at my table and I've never gotten, or I've only very rarely, I think Ghost and I played together one other time at the same table, and it was for a one-shot, so it'll be fun to play a campaign with him.
All right.
Yeah. But yeah, so I suppose with that, we've come to the end of the first half of this episode. So if you're here live with us on Twitch, don't go anywhere. We will be coming back ever so shortly. Same to those of you on Spotify. Of course, if you're on YouTube, we do divide our episodes in half. That means that down in the description below, you will see a link that will take you over to Diamond's half of our episode. And we are going to have some more fun discussion around a different lens of GM craft for the game there. You won't want to miss it. So for my half of the episode, though, this week, my name is Emmerron.
And I'm Diamond.
And I hope all of you have a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon wherever you're in the world. Stay healthy, stay safe, and until next time, peace.
Bye-bye.